They said Adrian Blackwood had no heart. Some swore he destroyed rivals without blinking. Others whispered he hadn't smiled in 10 years. To the world, he was Europe's coldest billionaire, born of steel, bred in power, untouchable. So when Elena Rossi, a 23-year-old househelp from Florence, dropped a tray of porcelain cups at his feet inside the grand hall of Blackwood estate, everyone thought her life was over. The crash echoed like a gunshot across the marble floors. The staff froze, breath caught in their throats. Elena's cheeks flushed with panic as she fell to her knees, scrambling to gather the shards. "Mi dispiace, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her Italian accent thick, her voice trembling. Then she heard it. The sound that made her blood run cold, footsteps. Slow. Steady. Each one deliberate, echoing through the silence like the approach of a judge. Adrian Blackwood stepped into view. Tall. Immaculately dressed in a tailored black suit that cut sharp lines across his broad frame. His eyes, steel gray, sharp as a blade, did not fall on the broken china, but on her. The air itself seemed to bend under the weight of his presence. Elena dared to look up, her brown eyes locking with his for the briefest moment. She had seen him before in newspapers and glossy magazines, a symbol of wealth and dominance. But up close, the intensity of his gaze was terrifying and magnetic. "You're new," he said at last, his voice calm, low, smooth like velvet laced with danger. "Yes, sir," she whispered, lowering her head. A pause. His gaze lingered long enough to make her heartbeat thunder in her ears. "Then learn quickly," he replied, stepping past her without a flicker of emotion. Only when the echo of his footsteps faded down the corridor did the other staff release their held breath. Relief washed across the hall. But Elena remained frozen on the floor, clutching fragments of porcelain, her heart pounding as if she had just brushed against a storm. She had survived her first encounter with Adrian Blackwood. But deep inside, she knew she hadn't escaped him at all. Because something in his eyes told her he had noticed her. Not as another maid in his mansion, but as something else. That night, she didn't know it yet, but her life had just changed forever. They said Adrian Blackwood's world was built on walls of iron gates, old money, and cold silence. Nobody crossed them, and nobody dared step too close. But Elena Rossi was already inside. Days passed since her disastrous first encounter, yet she still felt the weight of his gaze. Every time Adrian's presence filled a room, her pulse quickened, as though the memory of those steel-gray eyes lingered in her chest. Blackwood Estate itself was a kingdom in its own right. The hall stretched endlessly, lined with portraits of ancestors whose stern faces seemed to watch her every move. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, while polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of candlelight. For Elena, who came from a modest apartment in Florence where her siblings shared a single room, the mansion was both breathtaking and suffocating. She worked tirelessly, dusting grand libraries, arranging flowers in golden vases, serving wine at dinners where guests wore diamonds worth more than her family's entire neighborhood. And yet, despite the luxury around her, she never forgot why she was there: to earn enough to send money home to Luca and Isabella, her younger brother and sister waiting in Florence. But there was something she hadn't expected. Something far more dangerous than exhaustion. Adrian Blackwood was watching her. It was subtle at first. She would glance up while setting a table and find him leaning against the doorway, unreadable. Or she would feel the faintest trace of his cologne after passing through the same corridor moments before. He never spoke more than a word or two, yet his presence was impossible to ignore. And then came Claudia von Richter. She swept into the estate like she owned it, tall, blonde, draped in a velvet dress that hugged every curve. A childhood friend of Adrian's, an heiress to one of Germany's oldest fortunes, Claudia carried herself with the certainty of a woman who believed Adrian Blackwood belonged to her. Still hiding away in this castle of yours, she teased as Adrian welcomed her into the drawing room. Elena, serving drinks in silence, kept her head bowed. But she could feel Claudia's sharp eyes on her like daggers. "Who is this?" Claudia asked coolly, pointing at Elena with a perfectly manicured hand. "One of the staff," Adrian replied simply, his tone flat. Claudia smirked, leaning closer to Elena. "A maid, then. How quaint." Her words dripped with condescension. Elena's cheeks burned, but she remained silent. That was her role, silent, invisible. But to her astonishment, Adrian's eyes flicked toward Claudia, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. "She's more competent than most," he said, his voice low but firm. The room went still. Claudia's smile faltered. "And Elena?" Elena's heart skipped. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even kindness. But in a single sentence, Adrian Blackwood had done something nobody expected. He had defended her. That night, lying awake in her small quarters under the roof of the grand estate, Elena turned those words over and over in her mind. She told herself it meant nothing, that a man like him could never truly see someone like her. But deep down, beneath the fear and the logic, a dangerous thought began to take root. Maybe the coldest man in Europe wasn't as unfeeling as the world believed. Maybe, just maybe, his walls were starting to crack. They said Adrian Blackwood never lost control. Not in business. Not in society. Not in his private life. But Elena Rossi was about to see the cracks in his perfect armor. It was late evening at the Blackwood estate. The staff had retired to their quarters, and silence blanketed the mansion like a veil. Elena, finishing her duties, carried a stack of linens down the corridor when she heard a voice echoing from Adrian's study. At first, she thought it was the television. But as she drew closer, she realized it was him, his voice, sharp, commanding, burning with anger. "You told me the contract was secured." Adrian's words cut through the heavy oak door. "Now my company is exposed. I don't tolerate incompetence. Fix it tonight." A pause. Then, quieter but heavier, "Do you know why I trust no one? Because betrayal has a way of coming from those closest to you." The sound of a glass shattering against the wall followed. Elena froze in the corridor, her heart thundering. She shouldn't be there, shouldn't be listening. But the rawness in his voice held her in place. For the first time, she realized Adrian Blackwood wasn't just ruthless, he was wounded. She hurried away before he could catch her eavesdropping, but the echo of his words haunted her long into the night. The next morning, as she folded napkins in the dining hall, she found herself staring at him from across the room. Adrian sat with a newspaper, unread, his jaw clenched, his expression distant. For once, he didn't look like the untouchable billionaire. He looked tired. Elena quickly dropped her gaze when his eyes lifted, but it was too late. "Something on your mind, Miss Rossi?" His voice startled her. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected him to address her directly, not in front of others. "No, sir," she said softly, fumbling with the napkins. Adrian set the newspaper down. "Then why are you staring at me instead of working?" Heat rushed to her face. "Forgive me, sir. I didn't mean." But instead of reprimanding her, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with a curiosity she hadn't seen before. His eyes drifted to the book tucked discreetly under her tray, a worn Italian novel she often read during breaks. "You read?" he asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "Yes, mostly in Italian, sometimes in English." He tilted his head, a faint trace of something, amusement, passing through his eyes. "Interesting. Most people in this house only know how to polish silverware." Elena wasn't sure if that was an insult or a compliment, but she nodded politely, unsure what to say. That night, as she sat in the staff quarters, she thought about the moment again. The way his voice had softened when he spoke of books, the flicker of curiosity that broke through his otherwise unyielding exterior. It wasn't much. A question. A look. A fleeting moment. But for Elena, it was enough to know the truth. Adrian Blackwood wasn't all steel and stone. Somewhere beneath the armor, there was a man who bled, a man who remembered what it meant to feel. And that realization terrified her more than his reputation ever could. Because the closer she saw his humanity, the harder it became to protect her own heart. They said storms had a way of revealing truths. That night, the heavens tore open over the English countryside, lightning splitting the sky above Blackwood estate. Rain hammered against the tall windows, and the ancient mansion groaned under the wind. The power flickered, then died, plunging the grand halls into shadows. For the first time in decades, Blackwood estate was silent save for the storm raging outside. Elena Rossi moved quickly, lighting candles through the halls. Her footsteps echoed softly as she carried a tray with a teapot and cups, the flames trembling against the draft. When she entered the study, she froze. Adrian Blackwood was already there, sitting by the window, his sharp silhouette outlined by flashes of lightning. He wasn't working. No phone, no laptop. Just him, staring into the storm like a man facing an old enemy. Elena hesitated, then cleared her throat gently. "Would you like some tea, sir?" His eyes shifted toward her, gray, piercing even in the dim glow of candlelight. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a slight nod, he motioned for her to come closer. Her hands trembled as she set the tray down. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the rain's fury. She poured his cup carefully, the scent of jasmine filling the air. "You're not afraid of the storm?" His voice came suddenly, deep and low. Elena blinked, surprised. "No, sir. I've lived with worse. In Florence, our roof leaked every winter. A storm like this was almost normal." For the first time, his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. "Normal," he repeated, almost to himself. "I wouldn't know what that feels like." She glanced at him, curiosity tugging at her. "Why not?" His gaze returned to the window. "Because I never had the chance. My father believed normal was weakness. He raised me in boardrooms, not playgrounds. When he died, I inherited a crumbling empire and rebuilt it brick by brick. There was no room for normal, only survival." Elena's chest tightened at the rawness in his voice. She had never heard him speak this way, not cold, not commanding, but human. Quietly, she said, "I understand more than you think. I clean floors in a mansion, not because I want to, but because my siblings need food. Survival doesn't care if you're rich or poor. It just demands everything." Adrian turned to her then, fully, his eyes locking with hers. For a heartbeat, the storm outside seemed to fade. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one dared. Yet this young woman, a house help from Florence, had matched his truth with her own. The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows on the walls. The air felt charged, not just from the storm, but from something unspoken that neither of them dared name. "Elena," he said softly, as though testing the sound of her name. Her breath caught. "Yes, sir?" His gaze lingered, searching her face. For a moment, he looked as though he might say more. But then, with a slight shake of his head, he reached for his tea instead. The storm roared louder, but the silence between them spoke volumes. And Elena knew, with terrifying certainty, that something had shifted. It wasn't just duty that bound her to this house anymore. It was him. And she feared that the spark igniting between them was one neither of them could contain. They said Adrian Blackwood never let anyone close. But Elena Rossi was becoming the exception, and everyone in the estate could feel it. It began in small ways. A glance too long at breakfast. A pause in his voice when he addressed her. A subtle softening in his eyes when she entered a room. He never smiled, not fully, but with her, the silence seemed to bend differently. And that was dangerous. Elena felt it too. Every time their hands brushed, every time his eyes lingered, her heart betrayed her with a faster rhythm. She told herself it was foolishness, a dangerous dream. He was a billionaire. She was a maid. But hearts have a way of ignoring logic. It wasn't long before others began to notice. Especially Claudia von Richter. She had always believed Adrian would be hers, inevitable, unquestionable. So when she arrived at the Blackwood estate that afternoon, she was ready to stake her claim. Dressed in a silk emerald gown, diamonds glittering at her throat, Claudia moved through the halls as though she owned them. Her sharp eyes immediately caught the sight of Adrian and Elena standing in the conservatory. Elena was arranging fresh roses, her hands delicate against the petals, while Adrian stood unusually close, watching. Claudia's lips curved into a cold smile. Well, she purred, her voice dripping with disdain. It seems the great Adrian Blackwood has found himself, entertained by the help. Elena froze, blood rushing to her cheeks. She lowered her head, muttering, "Excuse me," and tried to leave. But Claudia stepped in her path, her perfume sharp, her smile cruel. "Tell me, Cara," Claudia mocked, her accent thick, "do they pay you extra for catching the master's attention? Or is this charity?" Elena's throat tightened, but before she could respond, Adrian's voice cut through the air like steel. "That's enough, Claudia." The German heiress blinked, stunned. She had expected him to laugh, to dismiss Elena, to play along with her cruelty. Instead, Adrian's jaw was set, his eyes cold, but not toward Elena. "You will not speak to her that way," he continued, his voice low and commanding. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Claudia's smile faltered, though she quickly masked it with a haughty laugh. "Adrian, really, it was just a joke." But Elena knew the truth. She had just witnessed something no one else in that mansion had ever seen: Adrian Blackwood choosing to defend someone beneath his world. That night, Elena sat in her small quarters, her mind racing. She replayed the moment over and over, the way his voice had cut through the cruelty, the way his eyes had looked at her, not as a maid, not as invisible, but as something more. And though she tried to bury it, a dangerous truth took root in her heart. Adrian Blackwood, the untouchable billionaire, was no longer just her employer. He was becoming the one thing she could never allow herself to want. And she was already falling for him. They said Adrian Blackwood had mastered control over markets, over men, over himself. But control has its limits. And Elena Rossi was the one boundary he could no longer hold. It began one late evening, when the estate had gone quiet. The storm of Claudia's insults still lingered in Elena's heart, and she had slipped into the library, seeking comfort in the pages of a book. The fire was low, casting a soft amber glow across the shelves. She didn't hear him enter. "Elena!" Her name, spoken in that deep, steady voice, made her jump. She turned to find Adrian leaning against the doorframe, his suit jacket undone, his tie slightly loosened. It was the first time she had seen him look less than perfect. And somehow, that made him even more dangerous. "Sir," she whispered, standing quickly. I didn't mean to intrude. I'll go." "Stay." The single word rooted her to the spot. His eyes locked with hers, sharp and unreadable, but filled with something she could no longer deny. "You shouldn't defend me like that," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Claudia, the others, they'll think." "They already think it," he interrupted, stepping closer. "Every servant in this house, every guest that comes through these doors. They whisper about you. About us." Her chest tightened. "Then you must put a stop to it." Adrian's gaze burned into her. "And what if I don't want to?" The silence between them pulsed with electricity. She tried to look away, but he reached out, his hand brushing her chin, tilting her face back toward his. His touch was firm, yet achingly gentle. "Elena," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Do you think I don't see you? Do you think I can keep pretending you're just another maid in this house? I've fought it, but every day, every moment, you break through walls I thought were unshakable." Her heart thundered. She wanted to step back, to remind herself of the impossible gulf between them, but her body betrayed her, leaning closer, drawn like a moth to a flame. "This is wrong," she whispered, her breath unsteady. "You are who you are, and I am. The only person who's ever made me feel alive," he cut in, his words fierce, raw, undeniable. And then, before she could protest, his lips met hers. The kiss was not the cold precision of a man used to control. It was hunger, it was surrender, it was every chain breaking all at once. For a moment, Elena melted into it, her hands trembling against his chest, the firelight flickering wildly around them. But just as quickly, she pulled away, breathless. "We can't," she gasped, her voice breaking. "If anyone finds out, it will destroy you. And me." Adrian's eyes searched hers, his jaw set with determination. "Let them whisper. Let them judge. I don't care. I won't lose you." The words shook her to her core. She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the dangerous storm he offered. But deep inside, fear gnawed at her, fear of scandal, of ruin, of a world that would never forgive their love. That night, as rumors spread among the staff, hushed voices about stolen glances and shadows in the library, Elena lay awake in her small bed, her lips still tingling from his kiss. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. And Adrian Blackwood, the man she should never have touched, was no longer just her master. He was the fire she could not resist. Whispers travel faster than fire in a palace of dry straw. And by morning, the Blackwood estate was ablaze with rumor. Elena Rossi, the housemaids, hissed behind closed doors. The billionaire's plaything sneered the butlers in the wine cellar. And at the breakfast table, Claudia raised her crystal glass with a venomous smile. "Well," she said sweetly, her eyes fixed on Adrian, "isn't it charming how quickly servants these days forget their place?" The room went silent. Every fork froze mid-air. Elena, carrying a tray of fruit, felt the weight of Claudia's words slice into her. Adrian didn't flinch. He set down his cup of coffee and met Claudia's stare. "Enough." The word landed like thunder. But Claudia wasn't finished. "You think I don't see it? The stolen glances, the late-night shadows in the library. Do you have any idea what society will say when they hear that Adrian Blackwood, the heir to one of Europe's most powerful empires, is wasting himself on a maid?" Elena's cheeks burned. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the tray. Adrian's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with steel. "Careful, Claudia." Claudia leaned forward, her voice dripping with poison. "Careful? No, Adrian. You should be careful. Because the board of Blackwood Industries will not tolerate scandal. Investors will flee. Shareholders will panic. And when that happens, you'll lose everything your father built." Her words hung in the air like a dagger. Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but her throat locked. What if Claudia was right? What if she was the reason Adrian lost everything? After breakfast, Elena fled to the gardens, tears streaming down her cheeks. She found refuge beneath the marble statue of Saint Cecilia, her breaths ragged, her chest heavy with guilt. She didn't hear Adrian approach until his shadow fell across her. "Elena," he said softly. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "She's right. All of them are right. You'll lose everything if you keep this. If you keep me." He crouched before her, his hands firm on her trembling shoulders. His gaze pierced through her fear. "Elena Rossi, listen to me. I don't care about their rules. I don't care about their gossip. The only thing I care about is you." Her eyes glistened. "But I care. Adrian, I can't be the reason your empire falls." His jaw tightened. "Then let it fall. I'll build it all again, brick by brick, if I have to. But I cannot build a life without you." Her heart ached with longing and terror all at once. Every word he spoke was a promise she wanted to believe. But deep inside, doubt whispered louder. And just as she opened her mouth to respond, a sharp voice cut through the roses. "Miss Rossi." Elena froze. Standing at the edge of the garden path was Mr. Grayson, the Blackwood family's lawyer, his expression cold as marble. "The board requests your presence," he said flatly. His eyes flicked to Adrian. "And yours, Mr. Blackwood. It seems urgent." The storm Claudia had promised was no longer a threat. It had arrived. The Blackwood boardroom was a fortress of glass and steel, perched high above Geneva's skyline. From its windows, the city glittered like jewels scattered across midnight velvet. But inside, the air was thick with tension. Adrian stood at the head of the polished mahogany table. Elena sat a few seats away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart pounding so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. Around them, a circle of sharp suits and sharper tongues, Blackwood's board of directors, watched like hawks preparing to strike. At last, Lord Harrington, the silver-haired chairman, cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood. Miss Rossi. His tone was ice wrapped in velvet. Let us not waste time. Rumors have reached the press. Disturbing rumors. Ones that place not only your reputation but the entire Blackwood empire at risk. Elena's cheeks flamed with shame. She wanted to vanish beneath the table, to disappear from the eyes stabbing into her. Adrian's voice cut through the silence. If this is about Elena, then let's speak plainly. Harrington's eyes narrowed. Very well. The board demands this distraction ends immediately. If you value your inheritance, your control of Blackwood Industries, and the fortune your father left you, you will terminate this entanglement. Gasps fluttered from the younger executives, but Elena barely heard them. The word terminate struck like a knife. Adrian leaned forward, his knuckles whitening on the table. She is not a distraction. She is the woman I love. The board erupted, angry voices overlapping, papers slamming, chairs scraping. You're risking billions. Shareholders will flee. This girl will destroy everything your father built. Elena's chest tightened. Shame. Fear. Helplessness. Each word felt heavier than chains. She glanced at Adrian, desperate to stop this before it was too late. Adrian, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please, don't do this for me. I'm not worth it. He turned to her, his jaw set, his eyes blazing. You're worth more than everything in this room combined. The chairman slammed his fist against the table, silencing the chaos. Enough. Mr. Blackwood, the decision is simple. Choose wisely. Keep Miss Rossi, and forfeit your right to lead Blackwood Industries. The empire will be stripped from your hands. Dismiss her immediately, and retain your position as heir, CEO, and master of this legacy. The words rang in the chamber like a death sentence. Elena's breath caught. She turned to Adrian, her lips parting, desperate to beg him to choose the empire, to save himself. But Adrian's hand found hers beneath the table. Firm. Warm. Unshakable. Adrian, she whispered. Don't. Don't throw it all away for me. He looked straight into her eyes. And then, straight at the board. My father built an empire, he said. His voice was steady, thunder wrapped in silk. But without Elena Rossi, I have nothing. The room froze. Every eye widened. Every jaw dropped. And Elena's heart shattered and soared all at once. Adrian Blackwood had chosen. And the world would never be the same. The boardroom of the Blackwood Empire headquarters in Vienna had never felt colder. The polished oak table gleamed under the chandelier, but to Adrian, it felt like a guillotine. Every shareholder, every executive, every vulture with a tie had gathered. The air buzzed with whispers, but their eyes were fixed on one man, Adrian Blackwood. At the head of the table, Frederick Cole, the silver-haired board chairman, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood, this meeting is not about your business acumen. It is about your personal decisions. Adrian's jaw tightened. You mean Elena? Murmurs erupted. The name of the housemaid turned beloved had become a scandal across Europe. Headlines screamed of betrayal to the Blackwood legacy. To them, Adrian's romance wasn't love, it was weakness. Exactly, Frederick said coldly. Your obsession has blinded you. You've turned down mergers, refused partnerships, and even risked our family reputation for the sake of what? A maid from Florence? Adrian slammed his fist on the table, his voice thunderous. She is not just a maid. She is the woman I love. And if this empire cannot respect that, then perhaps I don't belong here. The room fell silent. Frederick's lips curled in a smirk. Then you leave us no choice. Effective immediately, you are stripped of your position as CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. Your shares will be diluted, your influence removed. Gasps filled the room. Adrian stood frozen. His father's legacy, gone. But as he stared out the window, past Vienna's snow-capped rooftops, a strange calm washed over him. He thought of Elena's laughter, the warmth of her touch, the way she looked at him like he was more than the Empire's heir. If losing billions meant keeping that, then so be it. Adrian straightened, his voice steady. Take your empire. Take your legacy. I will build my own life, with her. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing like thunder through the marble halls. The empire of Blackwood no longer belonged to him. But Elena did. And that was the one empire worth keeping. The bells of St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna rang out across the city, their deep chimes carrying through snow-dusted streets. Inside, golden light streamed through stained glass windows, painting the pews in colors of crimson, emerald, and sapphire. At the altar stood Adrian Blackwood, no longer a billionaire, no longer Europe's most eligible heir, just a man in a simple black suit, his heart pounding as though it might burst from his chest. The doors creaked open, and gasps echoed through the cathedral. Elena stepped in. She wore a white lace gown that flowed like water, her hair pinned back with delicate pearls. For a moment, she seemed unreal, like an angel who had descended to remind the world that love was still possible. Adrian's eyes stung with tears as she walked toward him. Every step felt like a promise. Every glance was a vow. When she reached him, neither could speak. Their silence said more than words ever could. The priest cleared his throat, his voice gentle. Adrian Blackwood, do you take Elena Rossi to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Adrian's voice cracked, but his words rang clear. I do. With everything I am, I do. The priest turned to Elena. And Elena Rossi, do you take Adrian Blackwood, once heir to a fortune, now simply a man who loves you, as your husband? Tears glistened on her cheeks, but her smile shone brighter than any diamond. I do. 1,000 times, I do. Applause broke out as their lips met in a kiss that seemed to stop time. The cathedral roared with joy, though to Adrian and Elena, the world had gone silent. They had faced betrayal, humiliation, sacrifice. He had lost an empire, she had endured the weight of scorn. But here, at this altar, they had won something greater than billions. Love. As they walked hand in hand down the aisle, the bells of Vienna rang louder, as if the heavens themselves were celebrating. Adrian leaned close to her ear and whispered, "The world can take everything from me. But they'll never take you. You are my empire, Elena." She squeezed his hand, her eyes brimming with love. And you are my forever. Outside, snow fell softly over the city. The empire of Blackwood was no more, but the empire of love had just begun.